Podcast by Friday, episode 46. Oh, what a great idea. I don't know why I don't do that. And so they weren't insulted. They were actually flattered by the extra attention that you gave them. Hey, this guy really wants to remember who I am. Podcast by Friday with Bill Griggs and Kingsley Grant. We help people to create their minimal viable podcast by taking bold action to defeat procrastination and to get their voices heard.
I'm Kingsley Grant.
And I'm Bill Griggs.
And you're listening to
Podcast by Friday. Hello, Kingsley. How are you doing today?
Hey, Bill. I'm fantastic. I am super, man. It's always great getting behind the microphone and doing a recording of another episode of Podcast by Friday with you.
Yeah, it's one of my super favorite things to do every week. And our audience has got to be one of the greatest audiences in the world. I just want to give them a shout out and say hello to everybody out there who took the time to listen to an episode of Podcast by Friday, because without you, it would not be worth doing. Not that you're not a great conversationalist and all, Kingsley. I mean, I enjoy that, but it's really for the audience.
No, it's true. I mean, and I would agree and echo that thought, thoroughly, because that's so true. Everything we do here, we have that person in mind, as you have our voice stuck in your ear, coming through the earbud right there. We want to make sure that we take the time to give you what it is you're taking your precious time to listen for, and that is something of value, which we try our best to do at every time we release an episode. And today is no different as we speak about the networking as our topic at a live event.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I was recently out somewhere, and I met up with one of our listeners and had a conversation with them about an episode that we just did about choosing microphones, for their podcast. He mentioned to me how much that episode was just what he was looking for just at that moment in time. And, as a result of that conversation, we ended up, spending some time talking to each other about other things. In this case, it was fishing. I'm not a big, I'm not a big fisherman, but my brother is nuts about it. And so, we're standing there just talking. Because of that conversation, because of that, that little one connection around a microphone episode, we began to build a relationship. And that's what networking is all about.
And I think you just touch on a very good point, Bill, is that face-to-face, when you connect with people and you're able to look in their eyes and talk with them and hear their hearts and then connect at a level that you cannot do any other way. And so networking for me is a great thing. I don't do as much as I should. And when I do get a chance to do a networking event, especially around people who are like-minded, whether they are podcasters or speakers, man, I'm telling you, there's something that's electrifying that happen. And so when I think of networking, Bill, I have a different thought here.
Well, that's good, Kingsley, because I was going to ask you, what do you mean by networking?
Yeah, because I find that it's a process of trying to meet like-minded people, right? And it's a place where you can share information that is beneficial to both parties. I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I was at a networking event for speakers, and I'm a speaker, and it was so cool to listen to people who are out there speaking, what it is they're doing, learning from them, sharing information. And I'm telling you, I left that event enriched. I felt like, man, I got a new idea. How can I implement this? How can I make it work? So it's really the process of trying to meet like-minded people. And I find that there's something about that juices me up. What about you?
Oh, I'll tell you, going to a live event and meeting new people and reconnecting with folks that you've met previously is invaluable. And in fact, it kind of amps me up and gets me, really excited and ready to go forward and do new things. And it's because of the interactions and the new ideas and the new viewpoints that you get from the people that you are talking with and, getting to know. Networking is an amazingly effective tool for growth.
Yeah, I think you've just touched on something I believe just kind of segue in then why would you, as a listener, why would you need to network? Why do we network? And you just mentioned something just now about growth. So can you expand a little bit more about that, Bill?
Well, one of the things that you've got to realize is that not everybody knows about your business. Knew that you even existed, and networking, particularly at a live event, is a good chance for you to expose people to your business, and as a result, your business is going to grow. Period. That is, that's like if this then that. It's a fact. When more people know about your business, the more likely it is to grow. We've been to several podcast movement conferences together, Kingsley, and it's funny when we go back there. You'll see someone that you may have met earlier in the process, and they say, "Oh, you're the guy who's making those CNC things, those machine things. You're the maker dude, right?" And they may not remember it. It's, "Oh, aren't you the one that's done the podcast about Ben Franklin? Something about Ben Franklin?" Yeah. Boom, the connection starts again. Now you're free, and says, "I knew somebody who was into that. I told them about your podcast." Period.
Yeah, and I like that, Bill, because again, it put a face to, a name to a face, a voice to a face, but I also find why do we network is to grow our tribe, because for example, going back to the speakers event that I was at, and we were networking, people are, once you get to connect with them, they give you their card and they're really saying, "Hey, here's my information." Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is put immediately, I have Evernote, which I use. I scan that card right into my Evernote, so I will lose a card. I know I'm going to throw the card away, or I may not remember who the card was for. So I just take the card, scan it into my Evernote. I have the connection. Now they can be put on my mailing list. And so now I can grow my tribe because they have a like-minded, interest like I do. So that becomes an opportunity to expand. And how many times we miss that moment where we could really add one more person to our list that may come from a networking event. And so I believe it also is very helpful to grow our tribe.
Mm-hmm. I've gained listeners and friends and members of the group just through the networking. One Daniel is one of the people that I met. Daniel's thing was doing carpentry, but my thing with the CNC router tables and everything was just related enough that Daniel started following my group and my podcast, and that would not have happened had we not met at that live event. So that helped to grow my tribe. The other thing that is really cool about it is meeting influencers and meeting people who you admire. Like we've met Pat Flynn, we've met Dan Miller, we've met John Lee Dumas, Cliff Ravenscraft, and when you meet these people and you have the chance to network with them and to interact with them on more than just a superficial level, Aaron Walker, you form relationships and you form a trust, and you know that if you recognize that if somebody fits into their tribe, that you recommend them to them, and vice versa, they will remember you.
Yeah, and I think that kind of flows so smoothly because once you meet those people, they can make referrals for you to meet other new people, and it's so cool. I cannot tell you how many people I have met simply because I connected with an influencer who knows someone, and we are like 3 degrees separated because of one person you meet. And so it's a great way to meet new people that you may have on your list of who you want to meet, and probably have thought about how can I meet this person. Well, networking event becomes a great venue for that because that person you meet may know the very person you want to meet and make that referral.
Sure. And, the one thing you got to remember is that many times one interest, one niche doesn't necessarily connect with another niche on first glance, but they actually overlap in some areas. And so sometimes you can gain access to a whole new market or a different segment of the population just by making that referral, that connection with somebody's network. Because, they ask you on their show, or you ask them on their show to talk about a specific topic area, and that was a hot button for your community or for their community. And because of that, some of their listeners became some of your listeners, or vice versa. And that, that little spill, that crossover is really amazing, and how quickly that can work for you.
Yeah. And it's a great way to then, like you just said, be introduced to a new market that you'll be surprised there might be somebody there who actually needs what you have. And so the question comes up, Bill, even as a person, as you're listening and you're wondering, okay, I hear about the why, but is there a particular time? When do we network? When is it that you network, Bill?
Oh, whenever the opportunity arises. I'm always networking. Yeah, maybe that should be the T-shirt. Always be networking.
Hey, that's a good one.
But it's true. When we go to the live events, I sometimes don't even get in to see some of the featured speakers because I'm so busy out in the hall talking with somebody interesting that I met. And the time that I spend talking to that one person versus sitting in a crowd listening to one talk after another is invaluable because I'm forming relationships. I'm bonding with someone. And that's probably the biggest part of the live event opportunity for me, is get the chance to do that.
Yeah. I find like when it really helps to overcome certain, I would say, hurdles, especially in the area of communication, because you're meeting new people. You have to step up your game as they're talking about their own maybe niche or whatever it is that's going on in their lives. And I find the more I do this, the more I'm challenged to go back, learn new things, learn how better to present them. So it becomes an opportunity for us to improve our communication skills, especially in our niche. You find yourself being asked what it is you speak about, what it is you podcast about, what's your audience. Well, you have to be able to share that and articulate that in a very precise way. So I believe it challenges us to do that, to bring our communication to another level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always important to network. Whether it's to improve your communication skills or to take advantage of the opportunities that arise from it. And, we've met some amazing people, like Tom Schwab from Interview Valet. Was one person I spent a good deal of time with, just talking at the last conference about the really cool stuff he does. That I would have never stumbled across him unless I had a chance to meet him in the networking, because I wasn't really focused on his area of expertise, but it turned out to be a really cool relationship, and that's what it's all about.
Yep. So really, I'm hearing you're saying that going back to how the one of the phrases we've heard many times, always be selling. This has always been networking. Okay, so if there's anything you'll get from this so far, always, every time you get an opportunity, network. Now, the thing is that sometimes people wonder, okay, where can I, and I've found people sometimes struggle with this, Bill. Where can I meet people? Where can I go to meet certain people? Where do I do the networking? And is it online? Is it offline? And all these different things that may happen. So I find that, when I'm at a social gathering, I am networking. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Sometimes I don't go to church to network, but being a church, it gives me an opportunity to network. I meet people who may come up and speak to me. So it's a gathering, it's a different occasion, but it's an opportunity. When I go to an event, there's a social, I was with some family hanging out and just a gathering that really had no, just a meal, a birthday party. It was a birthday party. Yeah, a birthday party. We're celebrating. And people are going to talk to you about what did you do. Mm-hmm. As a social gathering. So as you said earlier, always be networking. So you go to a social gathering more than you probably even realize. Let me suggest that look for an opportunity at that gathering to network.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. Basically, if you're in the same room with another human being, you have the opportunity to network. And that's really the long and short of it. If you're going to a special event like a conference or a training of some sort, any time when you're all going to something for the same purpose, that's a good chance to network and to meet other people. There are also parties you can network at parties. Obviously, that's probably the most common area. But, some other places, if you're a drinker,
happy hour guy.
you could network at the bar. Just control your intake.
It's 5 p.m. somewhere in the world.
Yeah. This is the section of our show where we would normally pause for a word from our sponsor. Now, if you would like to be that sponsor of the Podcast by Friday show, and you have a product or service that you feel would be of benefit to new entrepreneurs starting their new podcast, then contact us at podcast@podcastbyfriday.com, and we'll see if you'd be a good fit. Well, Kingsley, you like to do a lot of vacationing and travel.
Yeah.
Didn't you recently get back from a cruise?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I found when I go on a cruise, and we try to do that, pretty often, my wife and I look for opportunities. Who can I meet? And one of the things that they do is trying to encourage you to sit at tables for breakfast or lunch or dinner with people that you may not know. They encourage that. And so you go to a restaurant to eat, and they'll say, okay, do you want to sit by yourself, or would you mind share a table? At times, okay, ever so often, I would say, okay, we'll sit by ourselves, my wife and I. But most times I'll say, I don't care. Let's share a table. It's amazing the people you meet at that table. People who have from vast experiences. Some are retirees. Some are still in the working business. The last cruise I was on, I met a guy who lives in South Florida, who is an attorney. And we were talking about online, because all he does is online things. So we have this great conversation, right? So I was networking with him, and we just kind of connected. So it's really an opportunity, especially vacation time. If you do cruises, don't miss out on that. Eat with other people, and you'll be surprised to see who you might meet at that table.
It's funny you mentioned that, just the random thing of where you sit down. I got to meet Marion Lissell and Russ John, two of the people that I really admire and have helped me quite a bit in my podcasting efforts, just by the random chance of having sat down in the one available seat near them. So I mean, that was a fantastic experience for me. So you never know where you're going to meet somebody or why, but it's basically anywhere that people are gathering is an opportunity for you to network.
Yeah, and I as you said earlier, Bill, always be and every time, and I think you said it so well, where you're in the presence of another person is an opportunity that you can use. So I love that,
Mm-hmm.
and but as I mentioned before, that those are those occasions you may have to network, right? But sometimes we might look at how can we turn this into how can we monetize? How can we scale? Is it possible to scale that networking opportunity? And what would that look like? So, Bill, I find sometimes going back to what you said at the influencers networking, you met someone who's someone of influence. I remember I met this guy at Podcast Movement. It was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and we began to talk. And last year, he remembered me and reached out to me because he was putting on an event and wanted to have a joint venture that would came out. And the reason why, because we had a chance to meet at Podcast Movement, and he connected with me and thought maybe I was a good person. Unfortunately, the thing didn't turn out because I could not make it to it was out in California, and I could not make it at the time he had the event, but it was a joint venture opportunity that arose as a result of that networking relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very cool when somebody thinks of you in that way. Hey, there's somebody I've met as a result of networking that I would like to partner with.
Yep.
And, that's awesome. I highly recommend that.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we got started as well here in Podcast by Friday, but, our meeting each other and, forming a bond and a relationship over that. But one of the other cool things about this is I get the chance through, the networking that I've been doing at the live events and at other things to meet people that I think would be a great fit for my podcast. And so there are many times when I will invite someone to come on as a guest on my podcast after having met them, through one of these live events or through networking. And they've been some of the best interviews out there. Just for an example, on this show, we've had Joel Bogus as one of the guests on this show, someone we met through networking. Kingsley, you've had literally hundreds of different guests as a result of that as well.
Yep, that's true. And as a matter of fact, Bill, I was looking back at some of the guests I've had over the years on my different podcasts. I'm thinking, man, you know what? It's really just astounding to think that these people you see and hear of and to know they were a guest on your show. And that came through networking or being referred because of an influencer you met,
Mm-hmm.
And once you're associated with that person, you know that person. Oh, man, I see they were on your show, and things start snowballing as a result of that.
Sure. And I'd like to digress for just a second to help our listeners think about this. When you have a guest on your show, and after you've ended your interview, but before you hang up the phone, it helps if you ask that person that you've already identified as somebody who is important to your niche, somebody who you want your folks to learn from. Who else do you know that would be a great fit for my podcast? That simple question will turn up more relationships and help you to grow your audience and your tribe and to grow the number of influences that are associated with your podcast.
And, Bill, I think you're so spot on with that. And I think it's a great, tip. So as you listen just now, I hope you take that as a way to get additional guests on your podcast. That's a huge tip. That's worth $1 million right there. But send a check to me, okay?
Hey, 50-50 partnership here.
All right, we go 50-50. But you mentioned earlier, Bill, because people who join, say, Facebook group, you have a large Facebook group, over 12,000 plus people in your group, and I find that networking really can enhance that growth, because someone who meets you, or you meet somebody, you're more apt to want to join their group and become, because you now know them, you like them, you trust them. And so if you want to join groups, networking become a great venue for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it worked for you as a group leader, but also if you want to become a part of someone else's group that really maybe you may not have been unless you have met that person.
Mm-hmm. I have a perfect example of that. I was introduced to John Berard of the Podcast for Makers fame, and from somebody in my network. And, I hadn't heard of John's efforts out there. And, they nickname it the Maker Cast, is what they call it. Mm-hmm. But as a result of that introduction, people who listened to his podcast episode joined my group, mm-hmm. and helped to grow my group. Hey, I heard you on on the MakerCast last week, and I thought I'd join. And you just never know where it goes, and it's really kind of cool. How quickly the groups can and do grow when you've got some networking going on behind the scenes too.
That is a cool thing, Bill, and I really believe that part of the success of your group has come through, it's very organic, because people can refer other people as well, because they've now met you, they met somebody else. And it's just really amazing how that just snowballs and becomes, take on a life of its own. But I find also, how do we make networking work for us? Again, we mentioned before, it's to get referrals. We kind of mentioned that over and over so far, so I won't really beat that horse too much, but getting referrals is so key in the networking place. But I really love, though, Bill, as when I want to, which I have in the past, work with coaches or mentors, knowing somebody that I've met, seeing what they're doing, looking them in the eye, speaking with them, connecting at that level, I find I'm more trustworthy of that person as a coach. Give an example. I have Kimanzi, Constable is a guy who really I admire in what he does. And mm-hmm. I had him on my show many, many years when he first got started. I was really building his business, which is really blowing up right now. And I've met Kimanzi personally. And after meeting with him, now when I had him on my show as a guest, he wasn't coaching at the point, but he became a coach after. And, I just met him virtually, but that was fine. And I knew his voice. But after I met him and spoke to him, and we had even sat down and had lunch one day and started talking, I realized it was a no-brainer for me to hire him as my coach, because I looked the guy in his eyes, spoke to him, hear his heart, know where he's going, build that relationship. It became much easier for me to have him as my coach. And I've also found people who have known me personally have also hired me to be a coach because of that networking event or that opportunity that I seized to go to. And I find that is a great way to have people mentor you or coach you in whatever capacity that you are focused on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there have been times when I've seen someone up on the stage at one of these events, immediately knew that they were a great fit for me. They clicked. I got it. They were the ones that were on the same wavelength as me, and then forming a relationship with them, either as a student or there was something that I could teach them. So far, in most cases, it's been as a student, but but I have a lot of students as well.
Disagree to that, because you have taught a lot of people in your group. I mean, I'm not a maker or a CNC guy, but I'm in your group, and I've seen you being so helpful as a teacher and coach. You may not see it as such, but I see people benefit greatly and look to you for just for the expert advice. So it's not just a student. I believe you are also a teacher in many ways.
Oh, yeah. I will admit, in fact, I did a coaching session yesterday for about an hour and a half. So that was kind of
There you go.
interesting. Yeah. So, yes, I should not denigrate what it is that I do, because I do some interesting things, and I should appreciate them at least as much as the people I help appreciate
Exactly.
them. So, shame on me. Bad host. Anyway.
And as you're listening, because Bill and I, we not just only do a co-host a podcast like this. We also mastermind. Just even before we got on the show, we were kind of going through our business and masterminding. So again, look at what has happened as a result of us meeting to a network and officially face to face, and how far we've come, build a relationship, and how today is working for us in this manner. So imagine you as you're listening. Who could it be? Where could it be? When could it be? I believe you could build something like what Bill and I have, or even beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Always be networking. I think I may have to trademark that. I like the sound of it. But all right, so we discussed quite a bit today in this episode about networking at live events, and how you should think about it. It's a process of trying to meet like-minded people where you can share information that's beneficial to both parties. Why we network: to help grow our business, to grow our tribe, to connect with influencers, for referrals, and to gain access to new markets, etc. And when we do it and where we do it. Now that you've got all this information at your fingertips, listeners, what should you do next?
That's I believe the most important thing right now is what you do with what you've heard. And so our challenge to you is this: make your next gathering a networking event. Think of it that way, and plan to come away with at least one new relationship that you have formed from that event.
Yep. I like what Kingsley said there. He said, make your next gathering a networking event. Not go to a networking event, but that's whatever your next gathering is now a networking event, because you made it so in your mind with that one goal of finding that one new relationship that you can form. I think that would be great. Another thing that they should do is this is a tip that I use when I'm meeting people, because you go to an event and you meet a lot of people, you get business cards. If you're going to a maker community event now, you get stickers. That's the new thing. Go figure. And in any case, when you meet that person, if you don't know that person very well, you just got a card from them, and you take that business card and you stick it in your pocket, and then you immediately forget about it. What you should do, this is what I do when in these events. Usually the back of the card is blank. Sometimes it's not. Immediately after I'm done talking with that person, I take out a pen and I write on the back of the business card the things that we talked about, the description of the person and everything. And that fixes in my mind who that person was, so that as I'm going through my cards later on, I can know, oh, yeah, that was Joe. We talked about how he was trying to get into an Amazon affiliate relationship with so-and-so. But, I've got that down there. Now that piece of paper actually means more than it would have if it was just a piece of paper sitting in my pocket.
I think what I like what you said is after the fact, because sometimes while you're there with the person, again, culturally, some cultures, you may say, hey, you're defacing their card and see it as an insult. So be careful of that. And I like what you just did is possibly, well, either the person has left your presence. You could go and then write on the card that at least you don't run that risk. Should in case you did not know that, at least give you a chance to write on the card away from them. And if it's a cultural thing, you would have violated that. So I think it's very important that you just have that in mind.
What Kingsley's referring to is in the for instance, I'll give you an example. In the Japanese culture, when someone gives you their business card. It is a treasured possession. The Japanese have a tradition of holding the business card in their hands the entire time they are talking to you. And it can be deemed to some as an insult to put the card away before you're done talking with them. So it probably wouldn't be such a great idea to write on that card.
No, I don't think so.
while this was going on, but you in their presence, but you might want to do it, later. But, just be aware that there are some cultural differences in how people perceive and receive business cards. And so, just a little tip for you out there. Yep.
And, Bill, I think what you're saying that maybe just in practice, I'm going to start doing that myself. I was thinking, even though it may not be an Asian culture, a person who from another culture who may see that as a disrespect. But I think some people see their card, they spend all this money to create a beautiful card. I wonder what goes through their mind if you're in their presence, write it on the card they just handed you. They could probably see it as a personal thing. I didn't even think about that until just now. So maybe a good practice across the board is just wait until they've gone and then do that,
Sometimes, now I first did this when I attended the Consumer Electronics Show, the CES show in Las Vegas in 2010. And I would have the business card out, and I kind of would explain, I'm sorry, I'm going to write on the back of your card, some of these things, because I want to make sure that I remember this conversation and who you are, and this, I'll have this right here. Most of the time, the American people that I was dealing with were like, oh, what a great idea. I don't know why I don't do that. And so they weren't insulted. They were actually flattered by the extra attention that you gave them. Hey, this guy really wants to remember who I am.
I can see that.
Yeah. So, it may be a cultural thing. Don't, just be aware of those things. There are differences in how people do business around the world. Learn those customs and adapt to them. So anyway,
that's true.
Let's focus. Your call to action was to make your next gathering a networking event. And that's it.
Yeah. And so we hope to hear from you. So if you when you do make your next gathering a networking event, we want to make sure you let us know how that went. And we want to give you an opportunity of how to connect with us and let us know. You could join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/podcast by Friday. And let's continue that conversation there. We would love to hear what it is you do. And others would love to see and hear how you went about making your next event a networking event and how you formed at least one new relationship. Let us know how that went. I mean, I'd be intrigued, and I'm sure Bill would be too, to see how you master that and what that was like for you. Mm-hmm. So let us know about your experience.
Yeah, and if you want to, a more direct way, you can send us an email at podcast@podcastbyfriday.com. We read each and every email that comes in. So, those are two ways that you can network with us, either through joining our group or through sending us an email.
And like Bill says, always be networking.
All right. Thank you once again for listening into our show, Podcast by Friday. We do appreciate and are so glad that you took the time out of your day to listen in. Podcast by Friday. Take bold action to create your minimal viable podcast today. Check out new episodes at podcastbyfriday.com or on iTunes or Spreaker.